That's right. Monday smash time, everybody. I'm Aslan Hajivandi. That's Ira Schoffel, managing editor of Warchant.com, the ultimate Seminoles sports source. Just also penned a story that's up on Warchant.com talking about the transfer portal, looking at some numbers, laying out some names. Be a subscriber to Warchant.com. You're watching us on YouTube. Use the promo code FSU1. I still think you might be able to get 2 months of access for only $1 to Warchant.com, the ultimate Seminoles sports source. Monday Smash brought to you by our great friend Russ Voorhis, State Farm agent. He's got you covered in not just Florida, right, Ira? Multi-state covered.
That's correct. Florida, Georgia, Alabama. He's got the 2 brick and mortar locations over in Jacksonville Beach and Orange Park. And we put up the numbers on the YouTube version. If you're not watching the YouTube version, if you're listening to the podcast, just go to russvorhis.com, russvorhis.com. All the information's there. You can get a quote or contact for more information through the website, or you can call the offices. But yeah, like you said, all your insurance needs, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. Russ is a great Nole and a great guy. He's got a great staff, so they'll take care of you.
Bumped into him in Charlotte when Florida State was capping off their 13-0 season. I can co-sign. Good dude. Large dude. Looks like probably like top 2 pick up basketball no matter what park you're at in the country, feel like.
He actually, he played a little hoops back in the day, and like you said, definitely first out of the limo if things go sideways.
All right, we like that. Good stuff. So the portal's going to open in, I don't know, 5 hours Eastern time. I don't know if it opens at midnight on the dot or whatnot, Ira, but is that going to be the biggest storyline in this 5th and final week of spring football for Florida State? Do you think more fans are going to be focused on what's happening on the field or what's happening in the transfer portal?
Well, that's probably going to depend on who goes in for Florida State's standpoint and who Florida State would be interested in when they go in from other schools. So it's a weird week. I think some schools obviously already finished their spring games, so their fans can focus entirely on the portal. Florida State's still got one more week. They've got the spring showcase on Saturday. So it's going to be a little divided attention, but I would think, we'll see. It wouldn't surprise me if a couple guys go in the portal this week for Florida State. It seems more likely that you'd wait till after the spring game. Like, what's the rush? But at the same time, like we saw Greedy Vance announce last week that he's going in, because sometimes you kind of want to get ahead of the rest of the people jumping in the portal. So we really don't have a good idea. This is the first time they've done it like this. The NCAA portal's been open for this window at this time. So it's going to be a new experience for all of us.
Again, the story is over on warchant.com, and Ira kind of lays out all the positions and sorts them by age in terms of their classification, whether they're freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and the numbers they have at those positions. I know receiver's the position that we keep talking about, and I don't want to give away the whole story here, but to me, like, you look at offensive line, but then you think about offensive line, and they're very top heavy in terms of like seniority. They got a lot of older guys that probably think they're in the mix. So I'd be very curious to see if anybody leaves on that position group. And then defensive back, it feels like in this day and age, you can never have too many of those guys. And again, that's another position group that, they've got guys like on the opposite side that are young that you probably think they have a lot of runway left to get on the field at Florida State. So I don't know, but I still think probably is the one position most people are probably bracing for attrition.
Yeah, but even if it is, I mean, you would like to think. I mean, I think the expectation would be if an older player went in, it would be a guy who's not necessarily in the 2 deep or necessarily starting. If a guy is going to be a senior and he's not starting, or if he's going to be maybe a redshirt sophomore and he's not on the 2 deep, those are prime candidates. Now, you're always going to have the surprises. There'll be a guy who is on the 2 deep, or a guy who maybe a younger guy who's been here for a semester or been here for a year and just decides this isn't the place for him. Last year, who was a receiver that came in last year? Goldie Lawrence, who came in last year and went in the portal basically less than a year after he got here. So you'll see some of those, but in general, the most natural progressions is a guy who's been on campus for at least 2 or 3 years, not really seeing headway, maybe getting recruited over. Those are the ones you're more likely to see. The ones that you don't expect are usually the ones that hurt more. The guy, if a guy who's projected as a starter goes in that nobody expects to happen, and there are rumors out there that there's going to be, big names from schools across the country who go in the portal during this window. And Florida State could be one of those schools. We'll have to see. Those are the ones that usually hurt the most, the surprise ones. The ones you can see coming are the ones who are guys that have been in the program for at least 2 or 3 years and really aren't moving up the depth chart.
Yeah, I guess like a Derek McClendon might. That's kind of the only a surprise that's really happened for Florida State that you figured was involved in the immediate plans that left the program, and it worked out fine. Maybe for both parties. I'm sure he's happy in Colorado. I just, looking at all those names, the way you laid it out in the story, I think it's a really nice kind of palatable way to look at it. But the more I looked at him, it's like, yeah, just look at that position. I think of that guy. I'm like, would he leave? And then I think about this guy,
Yeah, to me, the most mysterious one I think is running back. Because if you got seven, I mean, and again, I think there might be one guy in there that we're not 100% sure if they're on scholarship or not. But even if it's 6 or 7 scholarship running backs, it could be 7 scholarship running backs. That seems unlikely that you'd have 7 scholarship running backs. You just don't have enough roster space to carry that many. But who would leave? All those seniors, all of those veterans you think are going to play, and the young guys just got here. So Jeff's made that comment a few times on headlines that he thinks a running back or 2 are going to leave. And I'm like, who? I don't see it. Usually it's guys in those middle classes, but this running back room is basically a lot of seniors and then young guys.
I feel like we should do a time capsule kind of throwback. Right. Like all of us just put names in like a little box now, and then we'll open it up at when's the window close?
The 30th.
Then open up and see who had the most sort of call outs correct. And isn't the young man from Tallahassee, the Danzy isn't he running back? Won't he be coming here as a running back in the summer?
Yeah. He'd be one of the 7. Yeah, exactly. And now he's a guy that was an athlete in high school, and I think that he's a track guy, theoretically could play other positions, but I think he really wants to be a running back, and they've recruited him as a running back. So it's again, now he they wouldn't be the first guy in the world to come in and expect to play running back. They want him as a running back, and then see how crowded that room is and decide, what, maybe I'll give a different position a try. But as of now, yeah, he's one of those loaded running back room.
We have Ira here, so we're going to talk about the portal, obviously. Hit the thumbs up. Let's take a brief break, everybody. Hit the thumbs up while you're out there. Wes Todd, our guy in the Villages, says to do so. So let's make Wes in the Villages happy. Ira, also our point of contact when it comes to conference realignment, the work that he did. Was it last week? It feels like it was maybe a lifetime ago, having to be at the courthouse all day, keeping us posted on everything that was going on in the Leon County side of things. Our guy, Brett Taylor, Ira was wondering what happened in Mecklenburg County. That's North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. I'm hearing rumors, but can't find nothing.
Yeah, so the judge in the Mecklenburg County case, and that's where the ACC filed their complaint against Florida State. He told the ACC and ESPN that they needed to provide some unredacted information from the ESPN contract, because originally they redacted a lot of information. The ACC didn't want to, and the ESPN didn't want to put out a lot of their financial information about the contract, a lot of the terms of the contract. And FSU has been arguing that should be public record, that it should be seen at least by all parties so that it can be used to make a sound decision about how all this should play out. The judge, I guess a week or two ago when he issued his ruling up there, said that, okay, you're going to have to release some of this redacted information. We need more information from the ESPN agreement. The ACC filed their amended complaint today with some of that information unredacted. I've looked through it briefly. I don't see anything major changed. There's no financial details in there. There are some words that were unredacted, but there's no okay, this is what we've been waiting for. So we'll see. Maybe there's more paperwork to come, but right now it doesn't look like it's a major change from what we've seen. And then in Tallahassee, as you said, we were in the Tallahassee court last week, Leon County Court, for FSU's lawsuit, and we'll be back in there next Monday, the 22nd, for the next 2 motions in that case, as we kind of drag on in both jurisdictions.
Grillmaster adds, monetary figures are still redacted from the document they released today. So kind of guess underscore some of the stuff they were talking about. No big smoking guns out there now.
Yeah. And I don't know if even if the numbers are released, I don't know if that's really going to be, we kind of know the numbers because we see the numbers when the ACC has to file their tax returns. So we see that, okay, every school got $30 million or whatever, but there are some things in there that are redacted that are not numbers that could be interesting in terms of, some of the requirements. Like one thing that FSU's attorneys brought up in the case last week when we were in Leon County Court was that their interpretation of the ESPN agreement says that ESPN and the ACC will have the rights for any of these schools through 2036 as long as they're members of the conference. And what Clemson's lawsuit said and what Florida State has since also said in their complaints is, okay, well, what if we're not part of the conference anymore? Then you don't have our rights anymore. So but that could be something that's up for interpretation. And, the ACC, the FSU's attorneys and North Carolina's and Clemson's attorneys have only seen it when they've gone to look at the document in person. It hasn't been released to where everybody can look at it. So, we'll see if they get to that point, but that's something FSU really wants to be released.
Our guy, Brett, thanked you, by the way, Ira. Says you're the man.
You're welcome, Brett.
Correct. Accurate assessment, Brett. As we enter this 5th and final week of spring football, Ira, practice on Tuesday, Thursday, spring showcase Saturday, 4 p.m. Then they'll have I'm assuming some sort of like final walkthrough on Sunday, which will be closed to us, probably the 15th and final meeting of the Florida State football team for the spring season. Has anything been surprising for you? Is there anything that you're looking forward to most? I know Corey's working on something to talk about what he's hoping to see this final week. Is there something that you're surprised have seen so far, or something that you're hoping to see in these last few practices we're able to watch?
I don't know if there's been any like huge surprises. There have been a few individual players. I think Jalen Lucas was a surprise to everybody. I don't think any of us, and we knew he was fast. We knew he could be a return guy, but I don't think any of us expect him to be a big part of the offense, which he could end up being. I think from a positive standpoint, there's been some, like Jalen Lucas, Devontae Brown's a guy I wrote about the other day that I'm intrigued by at safety. He's a guy that started a bunch of games at UCF, didn't play much at Miami, but has always been a corner. But he was coached by Randy Shannon before. He's coached by Patrick Surtain before. They brought him in for a reason, and apparently it's to be in that competition at safety. And so I think he's a guy that can play. I didn't know if I expected that. Jalen Lucas, as I said, Marvin Jones Jr., I think is a guy that's probably more than I thought. Just not that I didn't expect him to be good, but I just didn't know what to expect because, it's kind of a different position, outside linebacker to defensive end. Plus, he just didn't do amazing things at Georgia. So you just didn't know what he would do here. But I think he's going to be really impressive. I think he's going to be a big part of what they do. And then, I think, from a negative standpoint, I have not been wowed by the receivers. I didn't expect to be. But I thought, you just kind of I got so used to having those huge catch radiuses from Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. And, now you realize, okay, these are more mere mortals in terms of height, at least. They do have more speed. And DJ's got a huge arm, and I think Mike Norvell will scheme it up. But in terms of like throwing up the 50-50 ball and feeling good about your chances, I just don't think that this receiver core is that. And it's not a knock on any of these guys, but if we haven't seen it yet, I'm feeling like we won't see it. And so it's just going to be different, right? I'm not saying it's worse. These guys have more speed. They might make more big plays. I think in the second half of last season, not only were Johnny and Keon not 100%, but also I think teams realized that they weren't going to run by them. And I think teams started defending them a little bit differently, and they were not playing them to beat them deep. And they got a lot more contact over the middle, and just it bogged things down. Well, it's harder to do that with guys that can run and really fly. So, it may look different, but that's one thing that I miss is just knowing you have guys that can win those 50-50 balls. I just haven't seen a lot of that. I don't know how you feel about it.
Yeah, I don't feel like any receiver has stepped up to fill the vacuum of production and leadership, at least on the field, in terms of catching the football in big time situations. Like, I don't even know who I would have if you told me right now it's 3rd and 8 on the Georgia Tech 15-yard line, in the fourth quarter of a 1-score game, like, in that certain moment of a game, you're not drawing up plays, you're drawing up, things for players. Like, I don't know who you'd go to. I really can't.
Malik Benson's probably the closest thing. Yeah.
But like, but what are you're gonna try to run just on a go route, like try to score a touchdown in that moment? You're gonna throw him over the middle. Although we've seen Kentron do fairly well with some stuff over the middle. So not that they're incapable, but I was hoping that somebody would kind of step up and do, like a guy like Hakeem Williams is somebody I think that all of us, we saw the way he looked in Tour of Duty. We realized that he was, working through some stuff last year, and just hope that, 15 practices would give him ample opportunities to maybe like take the reins of that position. And I don't think he has, but it's not to say that he can't come back in the summer and get it all figured out and have it click.
Yeah, and I think it's like defining your terms. Can they play receiver? Yes. Like Pokey Wilson wasn't a guy that was going to go up and just snatch the ball, but he made a lot of big plays. I mean, you can be a receiver that makes a lot of big plays, especially in an offense where you have a lot of weapons and you have a good running game, which I think they're going to have an improved running game this year, and a quarterback with a big arm. You can make a ton of big plays in the passing game. So it's not like these guys. I mean, Hakeem could catch 30 balls. Malik Benson could catch 40 balls. It's not like we're expecting them to not. It's just different. We're just not seeing a lot of the consistently special plays. It's more, hey, he got open, the quarterback put it there, he made the catch. It's just a little bit different.
One of the guys you mentioned earlier, a surprise, and I agree with you, Marvin Jones Jr. I'm like, man, are they going to strike lightning 3 times? With Jermaine and then Jared Verse and then now Marvin Jones Jr., Levy, our guy or gal maybe. With the given history of Jermaine Johnson and the recent observations of Marvin Jones Jr.'s improvements, is Coach John Papuchis better developing defensive ends, or is it more so the way Florida State uses their ends? When will it be time to put respect on John Papuchis' name, Ira Schoffel?
He definitely deserves respect without question. And I think when you look at it on paper, again, Jermaine Johnson goes from being like a decent player, a part-time starter at Georgia, to ACC Defensive Player of the Year in 1 year. That's impressive. Jared Verse, I think everybody knew Jared Verse was going to be good wherever he went, but he played an elite level. I think where you really have to give John Papuchis a lot of credit is 2 things. One is refining some of their techniques, but then also getting them to play hard. I mean, I think that, to me, that's getting guys to buy in and be selfless and really play hard. I think those are things that he's clearly done well. I'm usually more inclined, and I think you might be too, to say, hey, if a guy's 6'6" and an athletic freak, I don't know how much of that I'm giving credit to John Papuchis, but I mean, you got to harness it, right? So I think they've done a good job of identifying players. And I think Marvin Jones Jr. is another perfect example. But there is coaching, to me, is not just hand placement and footwork and techniques. Some of it also, I mean, it's part of that, but also part of it is to get guys to like be in a good frame of mind, motivate them, get them excited, get them fired up, or get onto them, whatever it is, and push the right buttons. And again, Marvin Jones Jr. is a perfect example where, I mean, I don't think they coach him exactly the way they coached Jared Verse, because he's a different kind of guy, but I think they're connecting with him because he seems to be really productive at this point.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's being a teacher, sometimes it's more of like a performance coach.
Right.
And you have to walk that line. And I mean, it's a teacher when it comes to Patrick Payton. I mean, we've seen the way that he's grown and flourished and developed. And then, maybe a guy like Marvin Jones Jr. or Jermaine or Jared that's come maybe a little bit more ready, just about fine tuning and refining, but also, again, like you said, just letting them play with the right state of mind to go out there and be productive. And we're seeing that. I also want to let people know, like, we also need to maybe factor in a little bit more of like what Odell brings to the table too, because
right. He works with those guys.
One of the cool things from last week about them practicing indoors, I think on Thursday or maybe Tuesday. No, it's Thursday because the Miami game was in town. There's moments where we're always watching the offense, but when they were in the IPF and everything was going on one field, I was in the other end zone watching the defensive line going through their drills. And I don't want to say like cross training, Ira, but there's moments where the DNs are working with Papuchis, interior guys are working with Odell, but then they go and switch. Interior guys start going working with Papuchis. Defensive ends are working with Odell. I saw Marvin Jones Jr. going through a drill with Odell, and Odell having to correct him a few times before it finally clicked, but then he went through it, and Odell was really pleased with it. So Odell's also involved in that mix when it comes to these guys developing too. So
very much. And people have probably noticed that, like, through the years when Mike Norvell, when somebody will ask John Papuchis about the defensive ends, a lot of times John Papuchis will give credit to Odell, or Mike Norvell might give credit to both of them as the defensive line coaches. And you're exactly right. It's not like either of them only coach their guys. They kind of share responsibilities. And like, so, Odell will be coaching pass rushing moves to defensive ends, even though he's the defensive tackles coach. Not to say John Papuchis doesn't, but like they'll split up those responsibilities, and they obviously work really well together, which is big. I mean, that's, again, you have Odell Higgins, who's an FSU legend, who's, was an FSU legend as a player, has been on the staff longer than anybody. He's one of the most tenured assistant coaches in the country. John Papuchis has only been here a few years, came in with Mike Norvell from a different part of the country, and they've meshed perfectly, and it seems like they've really done well together. One of the things that I think, on that note, like when you watch some of the pre-draft coverage and you watch some of the film that people show of Braden Fisk or Fabian Lovett or Jared Verse, is how much they work together, how well the defensive tackles and defensive ends work together. That's not always the case. There have been times, even since we've been covering Florida State, where it felt like they weren't really all on the same page. But I think that's been a positive too. Those guys really work together, and their players, their segment groups, I think really work well together.
Yeah. If you're bored later on, folks, go back on our YouTube channel, which you should be subscribed to, and go find the video after they beat Clemson last year, where we filmed like the on-field celebration. They're like, I caught Papuchis and Odell like embracing. I think like
Right.
one of them was crying.
Yeah.
I forget which one. I'm not gonna say which one. I don't know. I don't want to give any false information, but like they were really embracing. You could tell like they had, they were so happy to put the work in and finally see it pay off. And it was really a testimony just to how well everybody gets along and meshes. And it's a special, unique thing. Doesn't happen at all the programs out there. Questions here from our folks on YouTube. Get involved in the mix, everybody. Put a good question in there. I'll pop it up on the screen, I promise. Dustin R., good avatar, looks like out front, Westcott in the fountain. Look at that with their significant other. Shout out, Dustin. With Greedy Vance leaving, do you think it's necessary, Ira, to fill that spot, or do you think guys think that they're good with who we already have?
Real quick, though, on the fountain, Aslan. So my daughter, Alexa, who's a junior at FSU, went to her first 21st birthday party or whatever, where they went to the fountain or something. They did something at the fountain. And she made it sound like they threw the girl in the fountain. Is that legit, or is it more just they jump in?
Yeah.
You been to one of those?
It's a little more voluntary. I'll always remember my 21st birthday. Like we had a party at my house, and like a girl that I was dating was over, and like we're all playing poker, having a party at my house, and she's like, "Hey, come upstairs." I'm like, "Ooh, okay." And then she's like, "Hey, change your clothes, take your clothes off." I'm like, "All right." She's like, they're about to take you to the fountain and throw you in. And I'm like, "Oh, all right. Well, that ruins half the night. Now there goes the surprise." But yeah, like I got in the car, like, "Oh, we're going to go on a beer run or something." I got in the car, not knowing what's going on. And then we went to the fountain. I'm like, "Oh, don't throw me in. Don't throw me in." So
she did you a solid, at least.
Yeah.
It wasn't what you were hoping it was going to be. But yeah, but it seems like that's a very narrow thing to throw somebody in. But I guess you probably just gently drop them in. Anyway, I always just thought people jumped into it. But with as far as Greedy goes, yeah, no, I think that was a logjam position. I mean, when Earl Little came in as a nickel corner, once we started talking to the coaches before spring practice, and they said, "Oh, Greedy, that Earl Little is going to be a nickel corner," and we knew they were moving Kevin Noles back to nickel corner after the safety experiment last year. And then you had Greedy Vance returning, who was kind of Jarian Jones's backup, kind of split time there last year. It's like, okay, well, you're not going to play three nickel corners. So what's going to give there? I think some people thought Kevin Noles might look to leave, or Greedy Vance. Greedy Vance is the first one to leave. It's not surprising to me. I mean, I like Greedy. I think he can play. He's had some good moments at Florida State, but I just don't think that position was going to feature all of them. And I think Earl Little, from what I've seen, I think Earl Little seems to be like maybe the potential starter there. I mean, I think he could end up being the guy. And then maybe Greedy.
Is Noles the backup, the primary backup behind Earl? If we think Earl Little's number one slot corner, do we think
that's where I think it'll go? Now we'll see if Kevin Noles decides what he's okay with that. Again, this is just my opinion. I don't know what their plans are, but I think Greedy may have felt like, my guess is Greedy may have felt like, I'm not going to win this job, and I'm going to be a senior in college. I want to go play somewhere I could play. It could have been something else. It could have been some other reasons, but to me, I went into the spring thinking one of those guys is going to have to leave. They're pretty full at nickel corner. So we'll see. And if Earl Little clearly wins that job, then I think Kevin Noles could have a decision to make, although he's a guy, he's a FSU guy. He came here straight out of high school, has always loved FSU. So, he might be happy to stick it out. And if he does, they've got other guys they can move to nickel corner. It's a really versatile DB group, but I think that's where you're at right now.
All right. Don't want to give the milk away for free or the cow or whatever, but Brett Taylor has read your column, Ira. Do you agree with his assessment of your column? He thinks that there's 8 or 10 guys that could be in the portal. Wouldn't it be surprising to him, unless those 8 to 10 would be surprising names? that sound about right? Or is that, I didn't get that kind of big of a number from your story, but hey, I'm just one guy with a smaller brain.
No, it might have to be up to about 10, honestly, because they're going to have to see probably 6 or 7 guys just to get to the number. Yeah, to get to well, actually maybe a little bit lower because of the NCAA stuff. So they're probably going to have to see 6 or 7 guys no matter what. And then if they want to add 2 or 3 guys from the portal, then yeah, they're going to have to. And I think they probably want to add a few guys from the portal, so they may have to get to 10. Again, my scenarios, what I put out there, not saying names necessarily who I expect to leave because I don't really want to do that. But I think to me, I would focus on the guys who are a little bit older and aren't, as we said earlier, and aren't really projected to either be starters or on the 2 deep. I think if you're not on the 2 deep, those are by far the most likely candidates. And then some guys who are older, 3rd, 4th, 5th year in the program, they're not starters. Those guys might be willing to go. And then, as Brett said, there definitely could be a couple surprises. It wouldn't shock me at all. I mean, there's the NIL is a thing, and there are schools out there that are going to want to put feelers out to see if they could entice some players from other schools. And, like you said, Derek McClendon, it was around this time last year that Derek McClendon left, and he was a projected starter. He had started the year before. It was not a superstar, but it was a starter. So, those things can certainly happen too.
Yeah, it's tough. Again, I don't want to throw names out there, but like I'm looking at, they're just certain, like I think linebacker, I know that to me is a sneaky position. I think I could see one of those guys leaving, but they're sophomores,
That's the problem. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. And most of them are 2nd-year sophomores. So it's not like, again, I just think to me, if it's clear a guy has been in the program for 2 years and clearly cannot play, then that's okay. That's one thing. But none of those guys are in that boat. Just like really none of the young running backs are in that boat. So I don't, I don't know. I don't know that they're. I think receivers definitely a position where they're probably going to lose a couple. Offensive line probably is one, but they lose a couple. I think you might lose another DB or 2. But yeah, linebacker, tight end, running back. I'm not sure if you lose anybody. Tight end maybe, but I don't know if you lose any running backs or receivers.
Do you think medical?
Excuse me, running backs or linebackers. I do think you'll lose a receiver or 2.
Yeah. Do you think a medical DQ is in the cards for anybody? I mean, we don't need to name names, but like, is that, to get to the number, obviously, with some of these guys?
It's always possible. I mean, there are some, players that have had lingering injuries that, I wouldn't know that anybody's in that position, especially because usually that would be a player that's younger in their career that just can't get over an injury. There's nobody that jumps to my mind. But again, the reality is they'll get there. And for people that are wondering how that process works, I don't think Mike Norvell is going to go to anybody and say, bring your playbook, like you see on, the Hard Knocks. I mean, I don't think it's gonna be that. It would just be more like, hey, let's, they have exit meetings with every player at the end of every spring. And then you sit down and you say, listen, where do you feel like you are on the depth chart? This is where we see it. Are you going to be okay with that in the fall if you're not on the travel squad? Because not everybody travels. That's a big thing. Like travel squad's a big status thing. Like guys want to make the travel squad. Well, if you're not on the 2 deep, you're not going to go on the travel squad. So those are kind of, do you want to be at Florida State in your 3rd year or 4th year and not be on the travel squad? So those kinds of conversations, I think, lead to guys maybe making that decision if they haven't figured it out on their own.
I wonder, I think the last 3 weeks they had either practiced or scrimmaged on a Saturday, and they didn't do it this Saturday. I wonder if that was like a window for Norvell to like talk to players in regards to that sort of stuff, but I'm sure they're probably going to wait for the dust to settle on spring. We'll wait for the dust to settle with a little 15-second breather, everybody.
Contact Russ Vorhis for an auto quote today.
Like a good neighbor, Russ Vorhis is there, everybody. Check him out, russvorhis.com. 2 S's in Russ, only 1 S in Vorhis. Location in Jacksonville Beach, Orange Park, Florida. Has got you covered if you're in Georgia and Alabama as well. Longtime Florida State supporter, alum. Do the right thing. Give them a call if you need insurance, anything,
If you
home, auto, all of it, right?
if your next door neighbor is a State Farm agent, like if Russ lives next door, how many times do you use that joke? Like, and how tired of that joke does Russ get when his neighbors drop it on
Just
him?
out there wanting along, hey, like a good neighbor. And Russ like, just let me get my mail, man. Knock it off.
Exactly.
Continue our discussions here on the Monday Smash. Again, brought to you by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. James B. Shout out to him. He was in town this past weekend. I hope he took in some baseball. I know he was at the golf tournament, the Warchant.com Jeff Cameron charity golf tournament. Also the 50-50 winner, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
James
he
B.
was. That was awesome. Yeah, that was pretty cool. He and took it in stride. I would have been throwing 20s in the air, celebrating. He was just like, I'm cool. I'll put it in my pocket and keep it moving.
Good things happen to good people. So he's asked, do you think moving Armella inside is going to be a successful move? I'll defer to you, Ira.
Everything we hear is that it's gone really well. And it's hard for me to judge that just because I'm not Alex Atkins. I mean, he looks more comfortable there. Sometimes at tackle, there were times at tackle the last 2.5 years or whatever, where he looked really good. And then there were other times where he did not look very good. Like he just got off balance or just, had issues. Going up against a guy like Jared Verse, you can have that. I feel like when I've watched him in some of the drills when he's at guard, he seems to be handling himself better. I think, and talking to some people, it sounds like they're very encouraged by what they've seen. Now, at the same time, I don't know what that means as far as this fall, because you have all these older, more experienced guards, and they brought in some. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But yeah, I think it's been a good move for him, and I think they're really happy about it. Oh, look at James B.
Shout out to James B. Did the right thing, gave some of that money back to charity. Second Harvest. Awesome move by our guy, James B.
Not surprised.
This is one of those tricky ones, Ira, because, assuming that Robert Scott's going to be good, I just think Darius Washington's going to be on that field. He's going to be one of your starting five somewhere. So if Robert Scott's healthy and Jeremiah Byers is healthy, well, then there's one guard. Richie Leonard might be in the mix there. I think Keandre Jones. What's that?
So where are you saying there's one guard?
I think if
you're saying it would be Scott.
Healthy, Darius Washington's taking one of those guard positions.
Oh, I mean, that's possible. Or, man, he might be out one of those tackles too.
Yeah, I mean, so let's say he doesn't beat the tackles out. Let's say Jeremiah and Robert Scott hold on to it. Darius takes up one of your guard spots in your starting five, and then let's say Richie Leonard. I think like Keandre Jones, TJ Ferguson. We heard Mike Norvell offer effusive praise on Bryson Estes. Like, I think all those guys might be ahead of Julian right now at guard. But again, maybe, if things change, if Darius wins one of those tackle positions, that moves everybody up a little bit of a notch in the guard department. But I just wonder if Julian will feel that he's far ahead enough at that position to make an impact, or maybe he wants to be tackled because there's more allure to it, But
also think about it this way. So say that let's carry out what you just described. Okay. So say Darius moves inside to guard and starts at guard, and say the other one is Richie Leonard. Well, is Keandre Jones definitely going to stay for his senior year to be a backup? Is TJ Ferguson definitely going to stay to be a backup? I mean, I don't know what the rules are anymore with portal guys. Can they leave after just a semester? I mean, I think
that Zandamela kid, right? The Zandamela kid that Florida State liked so much and went to Southern Cal, he's already in the portal.
So I guess that's my point, is that there's all these chain reaction things that could happen. And I'm very curious to see how it plays out. And, and there's no sure thing about Robert Scott. He's not been healthy basically for the last couple of seasons. I mean, they were hopeful last season he would be healthy, and he wasn't, and barely played at all. And now, they're hoping to get him ready for this fall, but can you bank on that? So I don't know how that's going to play out. And then Byers, I think that Alex Atkins was real excited coming into the spring, saying that he thought Jeremiah Byers was going to take this big step from last season. I don't know. I mean, he's looked okay. There have been times where I thought he looked pretty good, and there are other times where I'm like, he's still not like a dominant offensive tackle. So that position could be open. So I mean, it's really, to me, that position is very wide open. It's very fluid. They've got a lot of guys. They could have up to 17 offensive linemen this fall if nobody leaves. But my guess is they probably will leave. And I saw somebody asking the question. There's talk that they might go after an offensive lineman. How would that work out? and they could. I mean, I think that there's some thought that they might go look for another tackle. They're very flush with guards. I don't think they need any more guards, but it wouldn't be a shock if they went out and got a tackle if the right tackle showed up. I don't think it's like a huge necessity, but I think if they saw a really good tackle, and that's a long shot. How many good tackles are going to go in the portal at this point, but if they had one, then maybe that's something that they do, and then now maybe that opens up now another guy wants to go in the portal. So to me, that position is probably going to be the most fluid because so much of it depends on what, and that's probably those conversations. I mean, I'm guessing the exit conversations at the end of the spring with Alex Atkins and these players is, where do you see me? Do you think I'm going to? Because I think a Keandre Jones or Armella or any of those guys would go to Alex and say, be straight with me. Am I in that top 8? Am I in the top 9? If I'm not, then maybe I need to go look for something else.
Yeah, just crazy to think that they're open to a tackle when they had a guy as a 5-star tackle and they moved him to guard, and they also brought in like 2 other guards in this cycle in the transfer portal when it comes to Ferguson and Keandre Jones. And I don't know. I think Jones probably likes the culture here. Like it felt like
he does.
Very much enjoyed it here more so than Auburn. So it feels like, man, I'll stick it out here. It's a crazy position. Guys go down the middle of the season. I know that I'll be one of the next man up. And I think, Ferguson hasn't wowed me at all, but I haven't really watched the offensive line close enough to make rock solid determinations. But it just, to me, it would seem a little bit knee jerk to transfer in here in January and then transfer out in April. But there's probably going to be a lot of guys that end up doing that because there's no more penalty about multiple time transfers. So that's kind of what I think. I don't want to call Armella odd man out, but that's like the dark horse name that I think would hurt some fans because obviously the legacy and the sort of, accolades he had coming to Florida State.
Yeah, definitely possible. And like you said, Estes, they've been talking him up, but he still hasn't played, right? He hasn't played much. And then you mentioned TJ Ferguson. He caught my eye the other day. He had a kind of a nasty play. He had a play where I don't know if you saw it. It just happened to be in front of me, but there was another lineman blocking a defensive player, and he didn't have anybody to block, so he came over and kind of cleaned the other guy out. And the defensive player was not very happy about it, and they exchanged some pleasantries after the play. But at least there was some nastiness there. He didn't just like watch that guy fight the other guy, battled the other guy. He came over and took him out, which I thought was a pretty aggressive play. So that it's at least something I've seen out of him.
Yeah, I think in one of the practice observations with Corey on the podcast, like he pulled on one play, and I forgot who the back was that ended up bursting through the hole, but like he was instrumental in that one singular play there. And there's been some times where I'm like 69, I'm like, nice. But I'm just like, who's that? I'm like, oh, it's the Ferguson guy. So, but yeah, again, who knows? I feel like
of those 2 transfers, I felt, Richie Leonard obviously has done a whole lot more in college and seems to be a little bit more athletic. He seems like, to me, more ready to play. So, I mean, I think we would have said that before spring and probably still say that now, though, right?
Yeah. See if maybe Michael Langston or Matt Lasser catches wind of this one. But yeah, I did see Texas had a really impressive offensive lineman, Peyton Kirkland, enter the portal. Maybe possibility. Maybe. Yeah. Floated on the PRB. Matt and Michael usually will respond to you fairly quickly and look into this sort of thing. So our guy, Dave in Bardstown, gonna have to lean on you here, Ira. Not a big John Candy guy. So never saw Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. He does ask as he throws $5 into the jar. Thank you, Dave. Will you guys fly to Ireland together and do a Warchant remake of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles?
Yeah, no, we're not going to do that. I'll just throw out the one. You can figure out this joke, Aslan. It's those aren't pillows, is they're laying next to each other. So okay. That's it's my only John Candy reference from that movie I'm going to share with you.
Okay, I got it. All right, yeah. We're staggering it out, everybody. We all can't be in the air at the same time because who else is going to fuel the Ultimate Seminoles sports source? That's warchant.com. So we'll be in plane and travel and motion at different points of that week going into the game. But super excited. Hope you're all out there joining us, and it'll be a fun time.
Yeah, we're to Aslan's point. Yeah, so we're all going basically separately. Like everybody's we're all meeting out there, but we're staggering our days. So yeah, we won't be. Could you imagine me sitting next to Corey for 8-9 hours in a plane? Good grief. That
Can he sit
go
still
well.
in a plane for 8-9 hours? I mean, I know he drives a lot. I feel like he takes breaks.
Medicated. He has to. He needs some pharmaceutical help to get through a flight that long, I think.
All right. Well, it's good to hear. It's good to see he's going to be back on a plane, man. Welcome to the 21st century, the 20th century, really, but nonetheless. Lee Fields asked us earlier, getting on the screen now. Guys, if DJ Uiagalelei comes along significantly this year, as well as how Jordan Travis developed, will Coach Norvell and Tokars officially be the quarterback lords?
Wow. Quarterback lords, I don't know. I don't know who anoints someone that, but yeah, man, I don't need to see DJ have a good year to believe that they're really good quarterback coaches. I mean, I think Mike Norvell has proven it in his time at Florida State, but then also at his time at his previous schools. And Tony Tokars has clearly been impressive. I think he's done a good job with all those guys. I think the young guys, Brock Glenn's gotten a lot better in the year he's been here under Tokars. And the thing that, it's worth pointing out, and, there's quarterback coaches like Jimbo always had a quarterback's coach, but man, I mean, I might as well have been the quarterback's coach. Jimbo stayed with the quarterbacks for 95% of practice. Now he saw other stuff. He would, if he saw an offensive lineman make a mistake, or if he saw something go on during 11-11, like he would yell at those other positions. But when they were in segments, Jimbo was always with the quarterbacks. And so quarterback's coach was always kind of a name only, and which was, I think, a point of contention with Randy Sanders, who I think felt like he should be the actual quarterback's coach. But no, Mike Norvell, it's Tony Tokars coach those guys. And so, but I think that they've already got a great reputation. And yeah, if DJ far exceeds what he's done at his previous schools, you would think, man, yeah, I mean, you would think that quarterbacks would be even more lining up to play for them because, the track record's impressive.
Yeah, that would be a big piece. That would help. I mean, I don't know if they'll quite be like Lincoln Riley thought of, like revered, at least when it comes to families wanting to get their kids to go play for a guy because they know they're going to be a Heisman guy going to the NFL. But yeah, another pelt would be really impressive because we're not going to see probably out of Brock Glenn this year, if even something were to happen injury wise. You want DJ to stay healthy and then produce at a really high level. Because man, let's be honest. Like we haven't maybe watched directly a lot of DJ Uiagalelei play, but we're aware of Clemson and what the narrative was of him being out there. Not, don't want to call damaged goods, but obviously the bloom was off the rose, or whatever you want to call it. He goes to Corvallis. That sounded like a really good stop for him. Go somewhere a little bit smaller and maybe not as much in the public eye and as much scrutiny. And he played really well. Like Oregon State was a really solid team and maybe the best conference in all of college football last year. If he can come back and play big boy football, as I'm putting air quotes if you're listening to us on the podcast, I mean, that's huge because I think a lot of people in big time football circles, right? I think people that in Clemson, people that follow the SEC, when they think of DJ Uiagalelei, they think of a guy that retreated and like left a really big time program. And now he's back on this stage. If he can play at the level that a 5-star guy that he was with his arm strength and arm talent has, and then that really starts opening up eyes and giving more traction to this program being maybe like a quarterback factory. So,
yeah, I agree 100%. And I'd put my chips there. I think I believe he's going to have a really good year. I think Norvell's secret sauce, I think, is one of his secret sauces is that he gets those guys to be confident. And I think you could see it in DJ. I think he's getting more and more confident. And I think his other secret sauce is really finding ways to accentuate the talents of who he's got on this team. That's why, and we've talked about it all spring. I know you guys have been talking about it on Wake Up. Jeff and Tom have been talking about it on their show. We've talked about it in headlines. And I'm going to say it again. This offense, I think, is going to look very different than it has certainly last year and probably at any year they've been here. But I think it's going to be fun in a different way because his arm is legit.
I think J-Dub might be joining us mid-show, which is fine. It's okay. You can join us whenever, but when you do show up, all we ask is you hit the thumbs up. That'd be awesome. J-Dub352, maybe he's in Newberry. Maybe he's in Silver Lake.
Greater Alachua County, Fort White, or is that one of those towns around there?
I think so. Sounds about right. Who's wide receiver one? I know we were deep, but do we have that guy?
I mean, I think, like you said, we talked about it earlier. I think Malik Benson's that guy. I just don't think he's proven that he's, one of those, elite wide receivers. Like Keon Coleman, when he has 3 touchdowns against LSU, he was the talk of college football. I mean, there were, people around the country were talking about Keon Coleman and Florida State's offense. Now, he didn't keep it up. He got a little bit injured, and the offense kind of went south a little bit. But I don't know that Malik's going to be at that level. But I think he's definitely wide receiver 1 right now. And but that's another position that's a little sneaky. If a big time receiver, this time last year, we didn't think they were going to go get a receiver in the portal. I wouldn't say that I expect them to go get a receiver in the portal, but if a big time receiver shows up and here's the DJ's doing well, they may be an attractive destination and they could bring in a guy. Now, if you've got another big time receiver to go with Malik Benson and Kentron Portier and those other pieces, that receiver core could look a whole lot different.
Speaking of wide receivers, Windy asks, is Hakeem hurt? Haven't heard him mentioned in quite a while.
We can't talk about injuries, Windy, but I mean, he's been in practice reports we've written about and stuff like that. I don't think there's anything to worry about there.
Yeah. If you were hoping though to have him be the wide receiver 1 and like take the reins again, I mentioned at the top of the show, I just don't think he's at that point yet. Doesn't mean that he can't get there. But certainly he's shown those flashes. It's just, it's boring coach speak, consistency, but that's kind of what it is. So,
right.
We hope that
and the other thing to point out, and I know, another thing we've talked about, these DBs are really good. This defensive back core, I mean, if you're going up against Azaria Thomas or Fentrell Cypress, I know some people had mixed reviews of him last year. I think he's much closer to probably what we thought he was going to be coming into last year. He's been real impressive at corner. You've got, Earl Little and some of these guys in the slot. I mean, they've got really good DBs. Quindarius Jones can play. So they're, all these receivers are going up against really good DBs. So we may see when they get in games that some of these guys that we're not sure about are actually better than we think because they're going up against studs in that secondary.
Fair. Ira, what about baseball? Florida State now a consensus top 10 program, number 5 in the Baseball America poll, 30-5, sweeps over Florida in the midweek, and then taking out Miami last weekend. First time since 1960 they beat both rivals, swept them like that.
Before I was born, Aslan.
Yeah.
It's rare when they throw out a stat that was before I was born. So
did you see on the telecast? It was great. It was like first time since 1960, and then the sub caption was, the Beatles were formed in 1960. It's like, I thought they were going to pull the gas on. So gas was 79 cents a gallon back in 1960 or whatever, but they didn't do that to us. How fun is this baseball team? I know you're an O's fan. You got all sorts of young talent up and down your lineup, but Tallahassee's got something fun cooking at Hauser these days.
It dawned on me the other day that like, I'm kind of a little bit mad at myself for not believing earlier, maybe. I just was I was so optimistic about Link last year, and I thought, they had some nice pieces, and maybe if, the one pitcher didn't get hurt, maybe they would have some of that. Yeah. Wyatt Crowell, maybe some of that would have come to fruition. But then they went in a tailspin and they lost all their confidence, and they got worse and worse as the year went on. And so I just was like, I'm not coming into this year with high expectations. I'm not doing it. And then even when they started winning games, it's like, okay, well, who are they really playing? But now you sit here and they're 30-5. They swept Florida. They swept Miami. These are not all-time great Miami or Florida teams, but they're Miami and Florida. And you're number 5 in the country in Baseball America. And it kind of irritates me. There's only a month left of the season, and they're going to be on the road the next 2 weekends. But these 2 weekends are huge. They got Wake Forest on the road, who's a top 10, top 15? Top 15 team. And then the week after that, they're at Duke, who's in the top 10. So those are huge series. But what's really, I think what gives them a slugger's chance in any game is that offense is so good. You feel like they're going to score some runs, and then the pitching seems like it's been good enough to give them a chance, right? So I don't, and then they've got 5 losses, and 2 of them were complete nonsense, where they had huge leads against Clemson and just kind of fell apart in one situation. So, yeah, man, this is a really special team. It's fun, man. It's just again, like I kind of regret not buying in earlier. It just was hard to know if it was real or not.
Yeah, whoever, if they win those 2 games against Clemson, they're probably the number 1 team in the country right now.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
They did lose him though, and that they've gotten over it quite well. So, and the really cool thing too is I think it's the first time they've been in the top 10, like a consensus top 10 team, and I don't know 5 or 6 years. I think the tweet was, and I remember those teams. There's something about this team that just feels so much more real. Like it's the offense. It just feels like the offense 1 through 9. It's just so much. There's always like an auto out somewhere in these lineups over the last 6 years, and that's not really the case right now.
Yeah, the 2019 team they were up to number 5 in at least 1 or 2 polls, and but that was early in the season, and they kind of plateaued. They kind of flattened out. This is late in the year. The 2018 team, I look back, they were ranked close to this high around that time, but you also Mike Martin was still the head coach, and I feel like they always got the benefit of the doubt with some of these polls, whereas this year it was the exact opposite. They had to play for weeks before anybody would even put them in their polls. D1 baseball famously finally just kicked Florida out after hanging on for dear life, not giving up on the Gators. And D1 baseball wouldn't put FSU in forever, and now they finally did. So it's this feels, to your point, this feels more legitimate, more earned than some of those teams that kind of got by on the name of Florida State baseball. Yeah,
I'm shout out to Dave Doherty also pointing out the fact that NC State's been quite solid this year. They took out Clemson this past weekend. So yeah, ACC, maybe a baseball conference now, although they did quite well in basketball. Thoughts on hoops right now, maybe from like a macro sort of sense, Ira. Kentucky loses Calipari. They get the guy from BYU who's an alum, Mark Pope, but he was only there for like 1 year he played at Kentucky. But then again, Jermaine Johnson played here for 1 year. If he wants to come back and be a defensive end coach, I'd be all about it. Right. But Cam Corn had entered the portal, committed to Pitt, it seems like. I was hoping that would be a guy that would maybe come back, maybe just need to be talked off the ledge to come back home, but he's going to Pitt. So that's a bit of a bummer because I was hoping that he'd be maybe part of the plans this upcoming season. What's going on basketball, Ira? I need some answers.
Yeah, a lot of the guys that went in the portal, I wasn't that concerned about because I kind of felt like it wasn't working out here, or they needed to go in a different direction. They need more impact players. Bobby Miller and Cam Corhen to me are losses. Those are big losses. Those are guys that were developmental guys that needed work to get better and showed some promise early in their careers and showed some promise in their second years, but never really made a big jump. And you're really hoping, okay, those guys will be part of the core for next season. And now they went in the portal and are leaving. And so, those are big losses. I mean, to me, again, Primo Spears coming in, it was his 4th school, I think, 3rd or 4th school. He's going to be transferring again. That didn't concern me too much. Tom House hadn't really developed. So, it's not the end of the world that he leaves. Some of those guys like that. But to me, Cam Corhen and Bobby Miller are bad signs. And Florida State's they've had some guys come in on visits. They had a kid last week, I believe from James Madison, who came out on a visit that they thought they had a really good chance with. I think he ended up committing to Louisville. There's just nothing great going on with that basketball program right now. I'm sure Leonard Hamilton will figure out a way to fill a roster. And yes, we expect Leonard Hamilton's going to be coaching this team next year, but it will be, at this point, it would just be a surprise if they can get impact players and have a really good season. It's just doesn't seem to be going in the right direction.
Anything to take away? I know it's not Florida State centric, but maybe if the time comes and Mike Norvell's got 4 national titles and he wants something else to challenge him, Florida State might be in the blue blood position of having to replace a really great coach. But the fact that like Kentucky, I don't know if they ever really thought they were going to get Dan Hurley, but they might have made a run at Dan Hurley. They might have made a run at Billy Donovan. We think they did make a run at Scott Drew. And like they just keep getting nose, and then they have to go get the guy from BYU. And I feel maybe there's a parallel to the Mike Norvell thing where it's like you get the young guy with the fun offense that might not have been your first option. It turns out to be just the elixir that you needed. But yeah, what's it mean when a blue blood like Kentucky has to maybe go to plan D?
I think the reality is in basketball, and this was kind of this isn't totally new in basketball in the sense that the great thing about basketball is, especially in the portal era and in the NIL era, is you don't have to be at Kentucky to be great. You can be at a lot of different schools if you've got NIL behind you and if you've got a coach that can get in transfer portal players and identify them. There are a lot of programs that can get great really quickly. And so I just think these coaches, once a coach is successful, the schools they're at don't want to give them up. And you'll have mid-major schools that will pay a fortune to keep their coach and pledge more NIL money to keep them where they're at. But Baylor, Scott Drew has turned everybody down at Baylor. So, that's not a shock that he turned Kentucky down. But as far as Florida State and again, like Mike Norvell, I think if it was going to happen, it was going to happen 2 months ago or 3 months ago, whenever Alabama came calling, because it doesn't get any bigger in Alabama, and they were going to give him anything he wanted. And I know Alabama people will say they got their guy. I'm 100% convinced Mike Norvell could have taken that job if he wanted it, and he decided to stay at Florida State. And so it's a great feather in the cap for Florida State. But when Florida State does look to hire a new men's basketball coach, you're just not getting a huge name. You're either going to get an assistant coach or maybe, a smaller school coach. I just, and I think I saw somewhere in some message boards, or might've been on social media, somebody throwing out the idea of like, they threw out some crazy names like Dan Hurley and people like that for Florida State. And it's like, you have to have some sense of reality. Like, it would be nice to get all those people. Remember, it's like back in the day when the popular message board rumor on the tribal council was Bobby Bowden turned down Bill Walsh. that people said that they could have had Bill Walsh. And it's like, man, I don't know. If that's what you think, then, I'm not going to argue here.
I remember everybody, we all wanted Norm Chow. I was part of like, get Norm Chow here. I'm leaving Los Angeles. He's been a West Coast guy his whole life. Have him come here and call and draw plays up for Bobby Bowden. But it was on the tribal council, and somebody was like, why can't we just go after Dan Hurley?
Right.
Why can't I just date Margot Robbie? Why can't I? So,
like Corey says, it's not illegal. It's not against the law.
Yeah, that's a good Corey Clark comment there. All right, so we go to practice tomorrow, Ira. That's practice 12, and then Thursday's 13, Saturday showcase 14, Sunday's 15. What else is going to be going on over at warchant.com between now and practice to get folks ready for this fifth and final week of spring football?
It's I think it's going to be a good week for again, like some of those players that we'd like to see establish roles. I think it would be really cool if maybe we saw some separation at receiver, maybe saw some separation at linebacker. To me, the linebacker is a position that's just been kind of, you look out there, and I know you've talked about this before, but like there's so many combinations. I don't know. There's no rhyme or reason from an outsider standpoint of who's running first team or second team or third team. They are giving all those guys tons of at-bats, and I'm sure they're evaluating it in the way they want to evaluate it. But it would be nice to come out of this week with a firmer idea of like, okay, what does it look like at some of these positions? Because I'll be honest with you, man, I don't know. I don't know. If you had to put money, how much money would you put on picking the starting linebackers for the season opener based on what we've seen?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not saying to even say who they are. Would you
right.
feel confident that you know the two?
Yeah, it's like the confidence points thing you have to put like in your NFL weekly picks or whatever. Yeah, that would not be.
I mean, DJ is going to start, I think, but I have no idea who the other could be. Sean Murphy, could be Nicholson, could be Cryer.
I'd say Cryer right now. I'd say Cryer.
I like Cryer.
Again, I don't feel really confident about that. Like I wouldn't, if they trot out Murphy and Lundy in Dublin, I'd be like, all right, yeah, that makes sense,
Right.
So
yeah, that to me, it would be cool if we saw some separation starting to develop here. We're a month in, and these are the last practices ostensibly until they come back for August camp. So, or I guess July camp this year. But, that's the big thing I'd like to see. And then who knows with the spring game, because, we'll see how physical it really is, because it seems like the trend is to not be much of a game. We'll see.
Did you see the tweet from Phil Steele? So he tweeted about watching the Ole Miss spring game, and he's like, not worth it. All I saw was a slam dunk contest, tug of war, and a hot dog eating thing. Total waste of time. And
get him, Phil.
A bunch of people are like, I loved it. Get off, I'll get off your lawn now, Phil. Right. And some people are like, who watches these things? And it's like a guy like that writes a preview for all like 300 teams in the world. But yeah, I wonder, because they're calling it a spring showcase. I know they haven't called it a game in quite a while, but I wonder if it'll be like, because it's feel like it's been pretty situational. It's almost been like another practice, but just open to the public, right? Like they'll start off with the ball like on the 10-yard line and start running some stuff, as opposed to like kicking the ball off and lining up
And
for
then
the screen from there.
having Tate throw pick sixes, that wasn't ideal.
Hey, he chased off Billy Wiles, the guy that started in Doak for the Golden Eagles. He left. He left Hattiesburg, man. He saw Tate the Great.
Like you said, it'd be kind of situationally, and hopefully, you know what, man, I always thought I always thought Jimbo kind of tailored sometimes the spring game stuff for the player. Like I thought he was going to make DeAndre Francois look like when DeAndre Francois took over as a starter that spring game. I think it was the one in Orlando because they had to move it, or they moved it down there just to do it. And he was gonna make DeAndre look good in that game. Like he wouldn't whistle him down on sacks.
Yeah.
He was trying to make DeAndre look as good as possible. I'd like Norvell to get DJ going, like scheme up some stuff so DJ can to get the fan base really behind him. Because if you play it straight up, then maybe the defense gets the best of it, and then people are going to walk out of that stadium being pretty depressed. So if I'm Mike Norvell, I'm dialing some stuff up for DJ to look good.
I like it. Yeah, I feel like he grooved it to where Malik Henry and DeAndre had to go like to overtime and shoot it out and battle it out for the win that spring game. I remember what you're talking about. But yeah, the funny thing is I've got the tweet up on the screen from Phil Steele. If you go to his Twitter now, it's just watch a Purdue spring game. Great game. Solid job by the staff. And it's like, just watch a Penn State spring game. So he's trying to, gas up everybody that's doing the right things, quote unquote. He says the Florida spring game, top-notch job by Chris Doring, dealing with lots of individual player notes from spring practice and position breakdowns. Good to see quarterback DJ Lagway and some of the talented freshmen in front of a crowd. Yeah, I don't know. I saw that they had 40,000 in Gainesville, and then there was a tweet that showed all the spring game attendance. It's Ohio State 80,000, Florida was 5th or 6th with 40,000, and it was just dot all the way down the screen, and it was Miami 1,000.
I feel like we need to get. I thought we had gotten past it. It feels like we're getting past the years where just the measuring contests about whose spring game had the biggest crowd and all. It's come on, man, who cares?
I'm over it as well. All right, that's a wrap for us. Again, check out State Farm agent Russ Vorhis in Jacksonville Beach and Orange Park. His website is Russ Vorhis, RussVorhis.com. Florida State alum, supporter, and big fan of what we do here on our shows. And hope you folks are as well. If you could hit the thumbs up, we'd appreciate it. Let's get some rest and then go watch practice, Ira, shall we?
Sounds like a plan. Thanks, Aslan.
Yeah, man. For Ira, I'm Aslan. Thanks for watching this edition of the Monday Smash.